When we talk about whales and dolphins and porpoises and the wide range of emotional experiences and mental experiences they're able to have, how intelligent are these creatures?
Well, I've studied their brains for over 30 years now, and everyone knows that these are very intelligent, complex beings. When you look at their brain, you realize that it has a number of characteristics that are even more elaborated than the human brain. And then when you look at their work, you know, their behavior in the field and what they do in their everyday lives, you see a lot of complexity there: social complexity, emotional bonding, culture. These are very complex beings, and they of course don't belong, you know, in concrete tanks.
When we think about them just in their natural environment, the way that they are supposed to be, and you talk about that social behavior and their culture, give me just a couple examples of that.
Yeah, so, you know, orcas, for instance, live their whole lives in family groups. They live in pods. Some of the males, for instance, stay with their moms their whole life. They're the ultimate mama's boys, and they are matrilineal. They are cultural, meaning each group of orcas has a different dialect. They do things differently. They eat different things. They have social relations that reflect their specific culture. So just like us, they're living in the oceans, in each group. You can't say all orcas do this, because just like us, they're different culturally from one to the other. And that's what makes them so interesting, because they are cultural beings that spend a long time as juveniles learning how to be proper orcas and learning their culture.
It's difficult for me to think about being plucked out of the place that I love with the people I love and where I was socialized and just dropped somewhere, especially by myself. What happens emotionally into the brain when they're plucked out and dropped into captivity?
Whether they're taken from the wild and put into a tank or born into the tank, either way it doesn't work. And in fact, when the animals are born into the tank, they actually do worse, because they miss any opportunity to experience what it's like to live in an actual family group. So they would normally be spending many years as a juvenile in a supportive family group, playing with others, with a mother and an aunt or a sister, taking care of them, teaching them their culture, teaching them how to eat, and everything that's needed to be in their culture. And in the tanks, there's no real culture, because it's just a collection of individuals, and sometimes even mothers and children are separated. So there's nothing natural about the social groups of orcas or beluga whales or bottlenose dolphins in marine parks. They're all due to management decisions. And so there's no culture, there's not really a dialect, there's nowhere to go, there's nothing to do. And their lives are generally shorter than they are in the wild. And this is when they're being fed and have 24/7 veterinary care, and still they are dying from opportunistic infections. They show behavioral stereotypies, which indicate that there's something going on in the brain. They're not developing correctly, and they're hyper-aggressive. So all the common signs of psychopathology are found in captive orcas, belugas, and to some extent other species as well, indicating that they cannot thrive in these facilities. And I would say that what happens to dolphins and whales in tanks is what happens to any animal, any species, who is placed in an impoverished environment, and that is that they cannot thrive. And there's actual documented evidence that when you place any kind of animal in an impoverished environment, their brain is harmed. There's brain damage. And although we cannot do that experiment with whales, it's been done with mice and rats and other animals, and I infer that when these animals are forced to grow up in an impoverished environment like a marine park, that there is damage to their brain.
Taking one of these animals out of an impoverished environment like that, can they begin to experience healing?
I think that dolphins and whales, if placed in a sanctuary, can experience healing. Why do I think that? Because other species experience healing in sanctuaries. Elephants, chimpanzees, bears, tigers. It's not immediate, but we see and we have evidence that when these animals are taken from confinement in an impoverished environment like a zoo and placed in a sanctuary, they start to realize where they are, that they're in a new environment, and you see a decrease in the frequency of stereotypies, abnormal behaviors. You start to see them acting more like a member of the species that they are of. And so I would expect that just like every other species, including humans, that there's a response to the environment, and when they go to sanctuary where they're allowed to do what they want and exercise their autonomy, that they're actually going to be behaving more naturally, and that will be helpful to them not only physically but psychologically.
This may sound like an obvious question, but just, with a little context to it, why can't I just take a whale out of captivity and drop them back in the ocean? Why do they need an off-ramp?
The sanctuary is an off-ramp for dolphin and whale captivity, and it's needed because those individual whales who were born into the tanks don't have the skills to survive. They are fed dead fish, and they don't know what prey is. Not only that, they don't have a group to go back to, a family group or a social group to go back to. And family and social group is everything to dolphins and whales. And if they don't have that to go back to, it is just too risky. They probably wouldn't survive, and we can't take the risk that they will learn that a live fish is food. We don't know that they can. And so sanctuary is really the best of both worlds. We're feeding them, we still have 24/7 veterinary care, but they're in an environment that is actually natural, and they can interact with a natural world and do what they want on a daily basis. And that is probably the best that it can be for currently captive dolphins and whales. And of course, there's no breeding. Eventually, there won't be any dolphins and whales in captivity in the future because the last ones will be in sanctuary, and then they will all be living in the ocean where they're supposed to be living.
Just kind of talk to me about the environment and how it's so much different than a tank.
Well, the sanctuary will be 100 acres of natural water space. It will be a netted off area in the ocean, in a cove, continuous with the ocean. It will have a natural bottom with all kinds of plants and animals. Fish can swim through and swim back out. So it's continuous with the natural environment. And a tank, as you know, is just a concrete tub. And it's really barren. There might be a couple of barren rocks in it, but there's really no comparison in terms of complexity because one is a highly artificial, impoverished environment, and the other one is a natural environment. There will be tides, there will be waves. And 100 acres is about 150 times the size of the largest concrete tank anywhere in the world. They will have depth to dive, which they typically do not in a concrete tank. And so we designed the sanctuary to promote as many natural behaviors as it can promote, and allow the residents to live as whales. It's still captivity, and it's not the best. I mean, the best environment is for them to be living in the ocean with their family, but given the situation now, a sanctuary is by far a better environment for their welfare than a concrete tank.
What has the journey been like so far to begin trying to design and build a space like this?
Oh my gosh, this is a harder project than any of us imagined. So we have a great team. Our executive director is Charles Vinnick, and he's very experienced in marine mammal rescue and rehab. He worked on the Keiko project. I worked with Cousteau for many years. And we have a lot of scientific expertise. So we know how to do this. But at the same time, it's the first time anything like this is being done. And so a lot of this it takes time. It takes time to find a site. It took us 2.5 years to find the right site, and we found a beautiful bay here in Nova Scotia. But what we didn't realize in the beginning was how important the local community is. And here in Sherbrooke, where our visitor center is, we have a local community who are truly partners, who are truly collaborators, and they want this just as much as we do. So that's really, really important. So it's been a huge learning curve for so many different elements of this project, but it's been great. It's been it's been hard, but it's been satisfying and gratifying, and we're getting to meet amazing people and give back something to these animals whose lives have been exploited and abused for decades.
And all of that work really kind of sets a playbook for future, you know what I mean? Once this one's done, it does some of the work.
Well, this is a model sanctuary, gold standard. And there are other sanctuary efforts around the world. There is one in Iceland for 2 beluga whales, and those beluga whales have just been put back in the bay. The National Aquarium is creating a sanctuary for 7 of their bottlenose dolphins. And there are many other sanctuaries in the world at different levels of development. But this one is meant to be the first for 2 different species in North America and will be a model. And so the idea is not just to give a better home to a dozen whales, but it's for it to be a template for changing our relationship with these animals, for how we can say to whales and dolphins, sorry, we kept you in tanks entertaining us for so long, but we're going to try to do what we can to make amends, and that's what a sanctuary is.
What is the dream for 20 years from now, 50 years from now?
My dream for 20, 50 years from now is for sanctuaries for whales and dolphins and other animals to become part of the landscape, to be common. And for as many animals who are living in entertainment facilities to be moved to sanctuaries. And then eventually, far in the future, for all species to be living where they evolved. And of course, nothing is perfect. We know that there are problems in the world. There's pollution, there's global warming, there's, for whales and dolphins, boat strikes and nets. But that should not deter us from trying to give back to them what is theirs. And what is theirs is tens of millions of years of evolution and adaptation in the ocean. And that's where they should be.
I did see on the website there's like design plans and videos, so I kind of saw the breakdown, but if you can just kind of summarize like what the actual structure of this kind of looks like. It's like anchored and then there's like a net underneath and it's open on the top, is that right?
So we will have over a mile of net with about an 8-inch mesh, and that net is a very sophisticated piece of equipment. It will have a walkway around it, it will be able to clean itself, potentially. I mean, it's not just a butterfly net, you know. That net will then have different placed compartments in it. So we will have quarantine tanks for the whales to come and stay in before they are in the larger space. We will have a lookout tower. We will have a full-service veterinary facility on shore, a place where we can provide and prepare their food. So everything about the infrastructure will be right there, and we will have a full-time and full-time staff, veterinarians, trainers. So this is going to, a sanctuary, an authentic sanctuary, takes all the things about a captive environment that protect the animals, like veterinary care and feeding them, and combines that with a natural environment. And that is an optimal environment for them at this point. So it's going to be a place where we will be there for them. The whales' welfare is our priority, nothing else.
And we'll go see it in person, but how would you describe the place where they're going to be in Port Hilford Bay? What does it look like? What does it feel like?
This place this sanctuary is in a big, beautiful bay. And I like to picture it from the point of view of the whales. So as a beluga whale or an orca, I spy hop, I come above the surface. And what do I see? I see an expanse of ocean. I see a shore. I see trees. I see clouds. And below, I see plants. I see fish. I see lobsters. I see all kinds of, I see different rocks and different natural features. So their whole world is going to be so much more complex than it could ever be in a concrete tank. And so that's what I think about is from the point of view of a beluga, what do you see when you pop up? Well, you see a natural world.
What else would you want people at home to know about the need for this sanctuary or the role that it's going to serve?
This sanctuary, like all authentic sanctuaries, serves the animals as well as our species. And how does it do that? Well, of course, it serves the animals because it is a place where we can provide as much of a natural environment as we can to the animals. We give them a little bit back of what was taken from them. So, but it's also a model for a change in our relationship to these animals, and it's an educational and outreach mechanism. So we're going to do all kinds of education. We're going to do all kinds of outreach. And a sanctuary is also for the next generation coming up, the young kids who get it, who I hope grow up knowing that dolphins and whales don't belong in a tank performing for us, and that sanctuaries represent a way that we can give back to them what we took from them, and that they know the real story. You know, when you go to an entertainment park, they have to convince you that these animals are happy to be there. But because of ticket sales, you know, but in a sanctuary, you don't have to do any of that. You can tell the real stories of the lived experiences of the whales there and help people to understand why whales belong in the ocean, and that is why the ocean needs to be kept healthy.
Hearing the news that Tokitae was going to be released, and I know we're hopeful that she's going to come back to Salish sea waters.
Yeah.
What was that moment like to hear?
Oh my gosh, to hear that Tokitae even has a chance to go back to her natal waters is something that I don't think anybody thought that they would ever hear in their lifetime. And thankfully, the efforts came together, and she will have the opportunity to go back to our natal waters where her family lives. And you know, she is the kind of individual who has survived for so long in a small tank entertaining people. She, like all of them, I mean, she deserves to have that opportunity. And so by bringing Toki back to natal waters, it's what should be done, and it's good for our soul too, because it allows us to say that, okay, we are the kind of people who will put in an effort to make right what we did that was wrong. And that's enriching for us. That's important. And so I hope that, you know, she gets to go back there and live a life that is so much better than where she's living now. She's a remarkable individual.